consensus view of party leaders in the U.S. intelligence community for some time now has been that Russia was determined to interfere in the 2016 election. Now we have an example of exactly what one of those attempts looked like. Here's an actual email published by The Intercept that Russian hackers used to try to break into state voting systems. It purported to be from an election vendor called VR Systems, and it came with a Word attachment packed with malware that, when opened, would give Russian hackers remote control over the computer in question. Whether they succeeded in actually changing any data inside the voting systems, well, that's a question for the person who broke this story. Joining me now is reporter Sam Biddle, whose story was published today in The Intercept. Also with me, Malcolm Nance, MSNBC terrorism analyst and author of The Plot to Hack America. So first, Sam, talk about what you found and what its significance is.
So right off the bat, the email is amazingly simple. It's only a couple lines of text. It came from a Gmail account, which isn't exactly the most devious smoke and mirrors approach. But I think most troubling was the response from the company, VR Systems. They aren't really sure who opened this email and whether it worked, which is 2 years after the fact, not what you want to hear.
Meaning this got sent out to a bunch of state election systems?
Correct, yeah.
And we know that for a fact.
The NSA assessed that it was, well over 100.
Okay, and we don't know who opened it.
Correct.
So, I guess I keep coming back. I want some definitive ruling, right? There's always the reporting on this where, they attempted to gain entry into state voter files.
Right.
And I always want some definitive ruling. Well, were they successful? Did they get in there? Did they change data? Do we have a definitive answer to that?
No. And it's been 2 years since this happened, by the almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November.
Malcolm, that strikes me as sort of remarkable.
Yeah, it's remarkable because everyone refuses to do an audit on their systems after that election. Look, I got into an exchange with the former Florida State Secretary of State when I made the assertion that Florida's subcontractor had apparently been one of these systems that was penetrated, and they denied it. I mean, hard. But so long as you're denying it, you will assume nothing is wrong. We have to assume from a counterintelligence and a counter cyber warfare perspective that something happened and it needs to be checked.
Yeah, so I guess the other issue here is if this is just a phishing email, basically. Am I right?
This is the same kind of phishing email someone would use to try to get your YouTube or Netflix login or your bank account. I mean,
right.
It is
pretty simple stuff.
Exactly.
We should say that pretty simple stuff can have big effects. This is, of course, the John Podesta phishing email, which is just, hi, John, someone just used your password to try to sign in your Google account. Google stopped the sign-in attempt. You should change your password immediately. Best the Gmail team. That's what led to
the simple ones work.
Right.
The simple emails work.
Right, which is another reason to think that someone clicked on that malware.
We'd like to know the answer.
I guess I feel like this is a more urgent question than it's been treated, Malcolm, from a policy perspective, which is, were state voter file systems compromised? Were they compromised, and by who? Do people still have access to them? Was any data within them changed? There are no answers to that definitively.
There are no answers, and they really don't want to have answers. We're about to go into an election season with the exact same systems in place. With also, you got to remember, you have half a country that does not believe any of this took place and has no legitimacy. So we're in trouble.
Yes, I think something that was really telling was that when I went to VR Systems, the vendor in question...
and they're vendors that services election software.
They service a handful of states, including swing states like Virginia and North Carolina. When I went to them to ask about this email, they put me in touch with basically a PR person. I think there's a lot of face saving going on, and that's maybe why we're not getting any answers here, because, VR Systems is a business, first and foremost. They're not accountable to voters.
Well, that's a question, right? Is there oversight in place from a sort of computer and tech security standpoint to make sure, Malcolm used the word audit, is there some protocol in place? Have states implemented something where they are going to check to make sure the security on these systems meets some set of standards?
There is nothing nationally that has been done in a rigorous manner. I think a lot of this is left to the states and the individual counties to sort of do their best on a county-by-county basis, but that's clearly lacking because we still don't have answers in June 2018.
There's also, Malcolm, it seems to me that the vulnerabilities here are pretty obvious just because the way American voting works is if you want to help one side or the other, you kind of can know which precincts to go after and mess with.
Well, that's true. But you also have to understand that the American system of voting is actually very, very difficult to get to hack in one particular space. I mean, there are systems that are used, every county, every precinct can use a very different system. But you notice they went after voter registration. And when we first heard this story about 20 months ago, I immediately recognized the threat. They don't have to actually hack the voter tallies. They can disqualify people from coming to the polls and disenfranchise tens of thousands of people if they wanted to by simply changing your zip code.
You're shaking your head.
No, that's completely right. I think a lot of people think of the great cyber threat to voting as ballot stuffing, digital ballot stuffing.
Or like changing yeses to nos, right?
All you have to do is make it hard to get in, to actually cast your ballot. If your name isn't on the list inexplicably, the whole system's going to get gummed up, and you may not get to vote that day.
And the point that I was making, right, is that the way American voting works is you could just pick 100 precincts in Virginia where if you knock out 10% of the names, you're knocking out Republican voters or knocking out Democratic voters because of the clustering of voters.
And that could be just as effective as actually changing votes that have been cast, as preventing votes from being cast in the first place.
What would you, if you could wave a magic wand, Malcolm, what would you do here?
Oh, well, I would have a giant national public-private partnership where we took the threat seriously, where we use the 2016 model and extrapolate that all of those little probes, scans, and attempts are part of a large-scale foreign adversary active measure, and then we would attack it directly.
Sam Biddle and Malcolm Nance, thanks for joining us.